Today they went through all their typical machinations, the radio warning, the fly alongside, the shooting, and the missiles. When Mac could see the pilots, they looked bored or at best resigned. They seemed as puzzled as the co pilots why the GC continued to waste such expensive equipment, munitions, and warheads. Mac looked at Albie and they shook their heads. Another day, another deliverance, Albie said. I'll never take it for granted, Mac said. I'm glad it doesn't hinge on clean living. You live clean enough, Albie said. Not by any virtue of my own, friend. As they went screaming over the desert to the Petra landing strip, Mac looked for the oversized plane Chang had appropriated from New Babylon. It sat at the end of the runway, big and plain as day. How do you figure that? Mac said. God must be blinding these guys. You can see it from a mile away, maybe more. Look there, Albie said. Almost directly below them was a serpentine line of several hundred exiting the mile-long SIG that led into and out of Petra. They were headed for the certain-like setup in the middle of the desert. As Mac focused on the airstrip and began his descent, he saw the chopper hopping from inside Petra to the end of the runway from where Abdullah would ferry them in. You think Smitty would want to get a closer look at this deal? Albie said. Why, would you? Sure, I'm game. We protected that far out. In the air we are. Might be taking a chance on foot. Let's go in the copter. This is an answer to prayer, Abdullah said a few minutes later. I still want to see what is going on out there. It's a risk, though, Smitty, Max said. You've got a pretty good cover, looking like you belong out here. Albie and I have our covers blown, and we got no disguises, no aliases, no fake marks, no nothing. You better decide if we're worth being seen with. Abdullah could not hide a smile. You rascal, Max said, grinning. I set myself up for a shot there, didn't I? And you almost took it. I was not about to shoot you, Mac. Verbally, you were. You sure were. I guess I've decided I would rather not be seen with you when we get back to Petra. Cute, but seriously now. I believe God will protect us. We should stick together, look official, but not make it plain that we do not have marks. Your turban covers you, and we've got caps. You think that's enough? Should we be armed? I have no idea how many GC will be here, Albie said, but I'm guessing once we get there, we're going to be vulnerable. Guns won't help, is what I guess I'm saying. Abdullah rubbed his forehead. We should stay in the chopper if we can see and hear from there. And if we're approached, you speak Texan at them, and they will be puzzled long enough for me to lift off. Oh, you're hot today, Smitty. Who would want to come close to a helicopter when the blades are turning? Abdullah studied his friends. It was clear they were as curious as he was. Should we check in with someone? Mac said. Who? Abdullah said. Your mommy? Mac nodded, conceding that Abdullah was developing a sense of humor, but not rewarding him with more than that. Rayford's in the air somewhere. It's on us. What are we going to do? I'm in, Albie said. Abdullah nodded. Mac climbed in the back of the chopper. Abdullah slid in behind the controls. Albie sat next to him. When they were in the air, Abdullah shouted over the din. We could check with Chang, have him put something in the computer. Neither responded, so Abdullah abandoned the idea. He wondered if they were being foolish. Down deep, he knew they were, but he could not stop himself from going. It was clear to Mac that this show was set up exclusively for the rebels from Petra. He tried to get out of Abdullah why anybody would want to leave the safety of that city, but it was an unanswerable rhetorical question. Abdullah was clearly taking his time, but the chopper quickly overtook the walking masses and sat down about 100 feet from the stage, whipping up a cloud of dust that a light breeze carried directly to the people on the platform. They stared at the chopper. Mac saw several armed GC looking and talking among themselves. One approached, a young, thick-chested man who would have been stocky even without the bulletproof vest that became apparent as he drew near. Abdullah had shut down and the blade had just stopped. Just sit here and look at him, Mac said. Make him make the first move. Vest's chest stood with his weapon dangling, totally non threatening, but he looked expectantly at Albie, who sat in the second seat by the door. You going to open up? The man said. Not if we don't have to, Albie said. The AC still has this thing cooled. You have to, the peacekeeper said. Albie looked back at Mac. Mac nodded. Albie opened the door. Mac leaned forward and spoke in a gruff voice. You don't want to be too close to this machine, son. Engine's still hot, and she's been known to spit some oil. And we might want to fire her up again just for a little air. What's your business here? Same as yours, security. Monitoring. Now I'm going to have to ask you to back away from the craft. It was gutsy, but after what Mac had been through the last year, to him, it was like a walk in the park. If the guy wanted to get into a contest of wills, Mac could stall him long enough for Smitty to get the engine roaring again, and they would be out of there. Of course, even small weapons, fire could bring down a chopper from close range, but maybe planning in his mind about the spitting of hot oil would give the GC pause. Mac's ruse worked. The man just nodded and backed off. Start her up, Smitty, Mac said. Gotta give him a reason to concede. The dust blew again. Abdullah shut down quickly. The GC returned. Mac took the offensive. He leaned past Albie and opened the door himself. Don't worry, he said. That's the last time we do that till we leave. We don't want to get people dusty or keep them from hearing or anything, okay? Just what I was going to say, sir. Mac gave him an index finger salute, and the people began showing up, already looking exhausted. It took several minutes for the crowd to gather, and it appeared that an otherwise normal-looking guy, whom Mac thought looked like a younger version of Leon Fortunato, grabbed the microphone. He wore white shoes, white slacks, a white shirt, and sounded like a motivational speaker, all peppy and crisp. He said he was the whole show, announcer, performer, everything. But I'm not typical. No, folks. People have called me a type of Christ. Well, you be the judge. All I can tell you is that I am not from here. That was not a joke. I am not even from this world. There's no music today, no dancing girls, just me, a wonder worker. I come under the authority of the risen Lord, Nikolai Carpathia, and I have been imbued with power from him. If you are skeptical, let me ask you to look at the sky. I know the sun is still high and hot and bright, but would you agree with me that there are no clouds? None, not one. Anyone see one anywhere on the distant horizon, forming somewhere in the great beyond? Shade your eyes. That's all right. But do me the favor of removing your sunglasses. Those of you who have them, you're squinting, and that's all right. Some of you are frowning, but you won't be in a moment. Would you like a nice cloud, something to block the sun for just an instant? I can provide one. You're skeptical, I can tell. Don't look at me. You'll miss it. You'll think it was a trick. But what do you call that? A shadow fell over the crowd. Even the GC gawked at the sky. Abdullah leaned over. Albie bent forward. Mac turned his body between them and looked up. A thick white cloud blotted out the sun. The people oohed and awed. How does he do that? Abdullah said. He already told you, Mac said. Power from Nikolai. Too quick? The miracle worker said. Did the sudden change in temperature chill you? Even out here in the desert? Maybe that's enough shade for the moment, huh? The cloud disappeared. It didn't move, fade, or dissipate. It was there, and then it was gone. How about half shade, but still enough of the sun coming through to keep you warm? It was instantaneous. A woman near the stage dropped to her knees and began worshiping the man. Oh, ma'am, thank you ever so kindly. But what is the cliche? You have seen nothing yet. How about this microphone stand? A solid steel base, long two-piece shaft, separate microphone and cord attached at the top. Anyone want to come up and prove it is what I say it is? An older man limped up the steps to the platform. He felt the mic and stand and then rapped on the upper shaft, causing thudding noises through the sound system. Oops, look at that, Miracle Man said. And the mic stand and mic had been replaced by a snake that led from his hand all the way to the transformer box. The people recoiled and some cried out, but as quickly as it had appeared, the snake disappeared and the mic stand were as before. Magic tricks? You know better. Had trouble getting enough water lately? Or shall we believe the stories coming from inside Petra? Think a spring in there was an act of God? Then what does that make me? He pointed in the middle of the crowd, and a spring gushed from the ground, splashing over their heads. Cool, crisp, and refreshing? No, he said. Enjoy. Go ahead. And they did. Hungry? Tired of the fair in your new home? How about a basket of real bread? Warm and chewy and more than enough for all. He reached behind him and brought out a wicker basket with a linen napkin in it. 5 pop-oversized chunks of bread, warm and golden brown, were piled in it. Start that around. Here you go. Sure. Take one. No, a whole one. Take 2 if you'd like. There's more where that came from. The basket passed from hand to hand, and everyone took at least one piece, several 2, and yet the basket was never depleted. Who am I? Who do you say that I am? I am a disciple of the living Lord, potent Carpathia. Have I persuaded you that he is all powerful? His patience has run out with you people, however. He would like me to administer the mark of loyalty to you, which I can do without technology. You don't doubt me anymore, do you? People shook their heads. Who will be first? I will do 4 simultaneously. You, and you. Ask your friends what they see. Even Mac could see that they had Carpathia's mark on their foreheads. More? Yes, raise your hands. Now, those of you who have your hands raised right now, hear me. No, new ones. Hands down. If you did not have them up when I said that, have you waited so long? Why? What was the holdup? The one I serve wants me to slay you, and so you're dead. More than 100 dropped to the desert floor, causing the rest to shriek and cry out. Silence. You do not think I could slay the lot of you. If I can slay them, can I not also raise them? These 6 right up here, arise. The 6 stood as if they had just awakened. They looked embarrassed, as if they didn't know why they had been on the ground. Think they were merely sleeping in a trance? All right, they're dead again. They dropped again. Now, if you know them, check their vital signs. He waited. No breath, no pulse, correct? Let that be a lesson to those who remain. You see that in the distance? Yes, there. The little cloud of dust, what appears to be tumbleweed rolling this way, those are vipers of the deadliest sort. They are coming for you. Some turned and began to run, but they froze in place. No, surely you do not think escape is possible from one who can create a cloud to cover the sun. If you want the mark of loyalty, raise your hand now and receive it. The rest of the crowd raised their hands, frantic. But more of you should die before the vipers get here. About 3 dozen keeled over. Why do the vipers keep coming? A woman cried. We have all obeyed. We have all taken the mark. The vipers are wise. That is all, he said. They know who was serious and loyal and who acted only out of fear for their lives. The spring turned to blood, and the people near it backed away. Fools, he said. You're all fools. Do you think a god like Nikolai Carpathia wants you as his subjects? No, he wants you dead and away from the clutches of his enemies. You are free to run now, and it is entertaining to me to see you run as fast and frantically as you can. But let me warn you, you will not outrun the vipers. You will not reach Petra in time to save yourselves. Your bodies will lay bloated and baking in the sun until the birds have their way with your flesh. For as I leave, I take with me the shade I provided. The people burst from the scene, screaming and staggering madly in the sand toward Petra. The GC guards seemed apologetic and stared at the Viper's changed course to chase down the people. The spring dried up, the cloud disappeared, and dozens of chunks of bread lay in the sand. Mac looked at Albie and Smitty, and they all shook their heads, trembling. Suddenly, the wonder worker stood directly in front of the chopper. Though he did not open his mouth, Mac heard him as if he were inside the craft. I know who you are. I know you by name. Your God is weak, and your faith a sham, and your time is limited. You shall surely die. Mac had difficulty finding his voice. Let's go, he croaked, and Abdullah started the engines. The cloud of sand blew up and then away, and as Smitty lifted off, Mac looked down to see nothing but a long stretch of undisturbed sand, dotted only by the dead who had dropped at the site. No GC, no Miracle Man, no platform, no bread, no vehicles. What about the snakes? He didn't see them either, but stretched for a quarter mile were the rest of the people, still and flat and grotesque on the desert floor, limbs splayed. Tyson was troubled in his spirit by a deep sense of foreboding. He knew he would not be able to shepherd all the way to the glorious appearing every person who had arrived in Petra, and yet he believed that when they had seen the mighty and miraculous hand of God, many of the undecided would be persuaded. Many had been, of that there was no doubt. That was what Chaim and the other elders were saying as Tyson despaired, deep in one of the caves. It was as if the Lord had told him that the rebels would not be returning, not any of them. But he didn't know if God would slay them, as he did in the Korah, rebellious in the days of Moses, or whether Antichrist would kill them after luring them into the desert with his great deception. He looked up when Naomi hurried in from the Technology and Communications Center and went directly to her father. She stole a glance at Tyson as she whispered in her father's ear, and when Tyson saw the slump of his shoulders and the sad shaking of his head, he knew. The young woman left, and her father made his way to Chaim. Tyson leaned over. Tell us both. I must know of this eventually anyway. But, sir, Naomi's father said, could you not be spared the totality of this until even one day after your triumph over the false prophet? Why must your rejoicing be tempered? I am not rejoicing, my friend. I was unable to keep the false prophet from enticing the rebels to go their own way. No matter what I did or said, tell me the whole of it. Spare me nothing. 3 of your friends from the tribulation force were eyewitnesses and are just now returning. They request a moment with you. Tyson stood. Of course. Where are they? On their way from the helipad. As he and Chaim neared the entrance to the cave, Mac, Albie, and Abdullah were coming in. They all embraced. The elders maintained a respectful distance as the 5 huddled, and Mac told the story. You should not have attended, Tyson said sadly. If we'd known what we were going to see, we wouldn't have, Mac said. But you know, sometimes us pilot types are as curious as little boys. This just might have cured us. That man was not even human, Tyson said. Surely he was a demonic apparition. Revelations 12 says that when Satan, who will deceive the whole world, was cast down from heaven to earth, his angels were cast out with him. And of course, it is no surprise that these people were not even recruited for the global community. John 10:10 says Satan wants only to steal and to kill and to destroy. I have a question, Dr. Ben Judah, Albie said. Is it okay not to like this man? I mean, everybody's outraged about what happened. But just when I think I have an idea what God might be up to, he lets something like this happen, and I don't understand him at all. Do not feel bad about that, my brother, unless your questioning of him makes you doubt him. He is in control. His ways are not our ways, and he sees a big picture we will not even be able to fathom this side of heaven. I too am distraught. I had so wished that some of these might run back to us, pleading that we intercede for them before God, the way the wayward children of Israel did in Old Testament times. I would have loved to pray for atonement for them or to hold up an image of a bronze snake so that those bitten could look upon it and be healed. But God is doing his winnowing work. He is cleansing the earth of his enemies, and he is allowing the undecided to face the consequences of their procrastination. You know as well as I do that no one in his right mind should choose against the God who can protect them against weapons of mass destruction. But here were these fools venturing out into the desert outside of God's blanket of protection, and there they lie. As the Apostle Paul put it, oh, the depth of the riches, both of the wisdom and knowledge of God. How unsearchable are his judgments, and his ways past finding out. For who hath known the mind of the Lord, or who hath been his counselor? For of him and through him and to him are all things. To him be glory forever. Mac was up before dawn, eager to get going, but as he waited for Albie and Abdullah, he was aware of a buzz throughout Petra. An announcement was going out through an elaborate word of mouth system that Tyson and Shane were calling for everyone to assemble after they had eaten their morning manna. Abdullah and Albie ate quickly and packed, joining Mac with a million others before the three of them were to lift off. Chaim addressed the crowd first. Tyson believes the Lord has told him that no more indecision reigns in the camp. You may confirm that by looking about you. Is there anyone in this place without the mark of the believer? Anyone, anywhere? We will not pressure or condemn you. This is just for our information. Mac made a cursory pan of the people within his vision, but mostly he watched Tyson and Chaim, who waited more than 10 minutes to be sure. Then Tyson stepped forward. The prophet Isaiah, he said, predicted that it shall come to pass in that day that the remnant of Israel and such as have escaped of the house of Jacob will never again depend on him who defeated them, but will depend on the Lord, the Holy One of Israel, in truth. The remnant will return, the remnant of Jacob, to the mighty God. For though your people, O Israel, be at the sound of the sea, a remnant of them will return. And of the evil ruler of this world who has tormented you, Isaiah says further, it shall come to pass in that day that his burden will be taken away from your shoulder, and his yoke from your neck, and the yoke will be destroyed. Praise the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The prophet Zechariah quoted our Lord God himself speaking of the land of Israel, that 2/3 of it shall be cut off and die, but 1/3 shall be left in it. I will bring the 1/3 through the fire, will refine them as silver as is refined, and test them as gold is tested. They will call on my name, and I will answer them. I will say, this is my people. And each one will say, the Lord is my God. My dear friends, you remnant of Israel, this is in accord with the clear teaching of Ezekiel chapter 37, where our barren nation is seen in the last days to be a valley of dry bones, referred to by the Lord himself as the whole house of Israel. They indeed say, our bones are dry, our hope is lost, and we ourselves are cut off. But then, dear ones, God said to Ezekiel, therefore prophesy and say to them, thus says the Lord God, behold, O my people, I will open your graves and cause you to come up from your graves and bring you into the land of Israel. I will put my spirit in you, and you shall live, and I will place you in our own land. Then you shall know that I, the Lord, have spoken it and performed it. It had been a long time since Rayford had done such hard physical labor, even at Miss Mia Ramon. The building of the airstrip for Operation Eagle had largely been done under his supervision, but by others with heavy equipment. He was in charge of this operation too, but there was no getting around that every pair of hands was crucial. Lionel Whalum had landed almost without incident at Gubernador Gregorius. The only trouble was that the main runway had been destroyed during the war, and the co-op had rebuilt it by duplicating it 100 feet parallel to the original. The GC were unaware of the rebuilding or of the huge encampment of underground believers who had been investing and harvesting wheat and trading through the co-op ever since. But when the destroyed runway was discarded, which Rayford's main contact there, Louis Arturo, later told him had taken weeks to haul away, what was left was a smooth, dark depression in the ground. From the air, it looked as if the runway was still there. Louis had spent his high school and college years in the United States and spoke fluent, though heavily accented English. He had had enough exposure to campus ministry groups that when he returned to Argentina and suffered through the disappearances, he knew exactly what had happened. He and some friends from childhood raced to their little Catholic church where hardly anyone was left. Their favorite priest and catechism teacher was gone too. But from literature they found in the library, they learned how to trust Christ personally. Soon they were the nucleus of the new body of believers in that area. Louis proved to be an earnest, fast-talking man, and while he took especially to Rewu and was friendly and cordial to everyone, his top priority was getting the plane loaded and these men on their way again. All we hear are rumors that the GC is polluting the Chico and that they are onto us, he said. I have many reasons to believe that this is only the talk of the paranoid, but we cannot take chances. The time grows short anyway, so let's move. He seemed to like Ree so much because, though the South Korean was the youngest and smallest member of Rayford's crew, with the exception of George Sebastian, he proved to be the best shape of anyone, Americans and Argentinians combined. Big George's reputation preceded him, and while he worked lifting heavy sacks of wheat aboard the plane by himself, many of the South Americans tried to get him to talk about his imprisonment in Greece and his escape. Rayford noticed that George tried to downplay it. I overpowered a woman half my size, but she was armed, no, and she had killed people. Well, we couldn't let her keep doing that, could we? Rayford worked mostly alongside Lionel, each of them able to handle one sack of wheat at a time. Ree helped too, but he was young and fast and wouldn't feel it in the morning like Ray and Lionel would. After 2 solid days' work, thanks to hydraulic loaders and 6 aluminum pallets that held up to 30,000 pounds each, the wheat was nearly loaded and the plane partially full when Louise came running. Senor Steele, to the tower with me, quick. I have field glasses. Rayford followed the young man to a new wooden 2-story tower that had been designed to blend into the landscape. Aircraft had to watch for it, but nosy type unaware of it might not see it at all. Rayford had to catch his breath at the top of the stairs, but when he was ready, Louise passed him the binocs and pointed into the distance. It took Rayford a few seconds to adjust the lenses, but what he saw made him wonder if they were already too late and their work had been wasted. And that's the end of chapter 18. Next, I'll be reading chapter 19. Thank you for joining me and have a wonderful day.